So from Cape Town, we move to California, where we visit one of travel tech's leading minds to get his views on the good that will emerge in corporate travel and meetings. Please welcome Johnny Thorsen, Vice President, Strategy and Innovation from American Express Digital Labs. Hello, Johnny. How are you in sunny California?
Hi, Hoon. I'm absolutely fine. How are things in Singapore?
Well, I hope that you can send some of that sunshine from California to us in Singapore because it's our turn to be on a heightened alert, unfortunately. So, but hey, what we want to do is focus on the good things that are going to come out of COVID, especially in terms of corporate travel and meetings. That's your area of expertise. And one of the good things about COVID is, for example, I get to pick your brains without us having to move from our homes, right? So that's an advantage. So number one, I read in an article that you wrote that number one, you pick sustainability as a clear winner, right? And I just want to quote you. I just want to quote what you wrote, and you said, "There is no doubt that we've entered a new phase where the concept of unlimited cheap leisure travel and almost unlimited but more expensive corporate travel has been replaced by a new mindset of justifiable, purposeful, value-driven, or permissible travel." So Johnny, do you think that's just wishful thinking, or won't human nature prevail? Because as we've seen in China and the US, where there is travel recovery, I mean, people are just getting back on the road.
Yeah, I actually do think it's going to happen, meaning there will be a reduction in the travel volumes. And I'm saying that for a few reasons. First of all, the sustainability wave had started before COVID. So it's not something that came out of COVID. There were already some very clear signs about how important sustainability was becoming to the travel industry. But then I think COVID have accelerated the awareness and understanding of that, because around the world, everybody have seen clearer skies. They've seen kind of the environment improve in a number of ways. And thirdly, while it's kind of almost drowning in the COVID news, we are still seeing more and more data telling us how bad the situation is around climate change and carbon emission levels. So politicians are waking up, and they are now tightening the framework. There will be new rules in place that simply discourage cheap travel. And in some countries in Europe, they are actually talking about banning cheap travels. In other words, there will be a minimum price per flown hour. An airline can no longer dump tickets. So I do think we will see a reduction overall because people understand it.
Yeah, I read a report that in France, they were banning some of the short-term flights. But, the key is measurement, right? Johnny, we've been talking about sustainability for a long time, but the key is to measure it. And you spoke about new technology to calculate the value of a trip based on corporate framework, and how we need to move to a place where the first question asked about a corporate travel program is, what was your average carbon emission per travel day last year, rather than what was your travel budget last year? So explain how this can be done and what's being developed around this.
Yeah, so for many, many years, corporate travel have worked on a money budget, right? So at the beginning of the year, the CFO would make an allocation and companies would travel against that budget. We're getting to the point where there will be a similar carbon budget. And the moment you have a budget, it raises awareness of how can I get most out of my budget. And if you have a budget, say, of 100,000 tons of CO2 at the beginning of the year, you will start focusing on being as kind of economical with the carbon emission as possible, because that will at least allow you to travel more days. And therefore, a key KPI will become emission per travel day, because you have to budget ahead and find out how much travel can we have from a given carbon emission allocation. And for people who don't believe that,
there will be tech solutions that will help you track your carbon emission, per trip. All right.
There will be, because we have enough data to calculate averages, But where we are now going, we're going into specific details, engine type on a flight, cargo load versus passenger load, time spent on tarmac. All these things matter, and they're being captured and calculated, and corporates who want this can get it.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's move on to good number 2, okay? Good number 2 you said was virtual and hybrid meetings will evolve to feel like a real experience. Now, I'm going to challenge you on this because for the past 16 months, I've experimented with virtual and hybrid, and frankly, none of it feels real to me. So talk to us about the new technologies that you are moving in from the online gaming world, you said, to make it feel real.
Yeah. So right now we're having what I'm calling a classic first generation square meeting. We see each other in squares on the screen. And one of the problems with square meetings, the more people attending, the smaller the squares become, the harder it is to even see reactions of other people. So the new kind of second generation virtual meetings are creating known as metaverses or digital universes, where you join as an avatar. You see others who are in the lobby, in the reception, and you can move over to them and engage in ad hoc conversations. So we are out of the square and we're into a real live venue, a so-called digital twin venue. It can be a copy of the Marina Bay Sands digitally. I can go to the meeting room on level 5, where I'm used to going in person. So it changes the emotional connection to the meeting. I have tried several of these. It really does change your perception. And then there's some interesting side benefits for the organizers. You now know where people go and spend their time. You know how many minutes of interaction took place between the avatars, because you immediately create conversations when you meet each other virtually.
Right, but I'm not. I mean, it can come to as close as real as possible, but I'm not really sure that it will ever actually be real. But
I
maybe.
Agree. I do agree, Hoon, but one thing that's so interesting is the hybrid version, right? So you will be in Marina Bay Sands, I'm sure, in October for your annual event. I don't know if I will be able to come out, but I know the venue. So if I can join virtually in a digital copy of the real venue, at least for me, it feels much more like I am there. And for you,
right.
It will expand your audience reach dramatically. So you can still have people in MBS, but you can also have people joining from around the world. That's right. More value for you.
Yeah, and your belief is that this new tech will make it more compelling actually to have real life events again, and that hybrid meetings become the perfect combo of reduced carbon footprint but more commercial value per delegate. So that's your position. Okay, let's move on to good number 3. Okay, good number 3 you said was we can fix the automation failures, right? And how the COVID fallout exposed simple tasks like the airline ticket refunds that ended up taking months of manual work to process. So one question, what's the biggest automation failure that needs to be fixed?
It's, at least right now, it clearly was the airline credit process. Why? Because there's still airlines who haven't managed to credit everything. Some think it's because of political kind of tactics, but on average, it's just a very expensive and time-consuming process for an airline. The second one is, of course, our management of the so-called, health status with all the new digital passports that are coming through, health passports. Again, a lot of them require a lot of manual work despite all the relevant data being in a digital environment already. So we're seeing all these kind of repeats of travel industry problems, no real standards, and therefore we end up with a lot of manual work. The final one that I'm puzzled about is how suppliers in the travel industry are managing their pricing and the loading of pricing. There's still a lot of manual work going on behind the scenes before prices move into the distribution environment. I simply don't see why that's the case anymore. And then access to booking data.
But Johnny, we have an industry that's in macro shock. Right. I mean, in Asia, airlines are like 90% down, right? Hotels, there is no cross-border travel, right? So it's in macro shock. How can an industry like this fix its automation problems?
That's a great question, and obviously an airline cannot change the legacy tech stack overnight, especially not when half of their digital kind of resources have been sent away or have left them. But that's where the suppliers, I think, have to accept this is the time to embrace new, smaller technology companies that are very, very good at some specific areas, and take that mindset into the tech house and start saying, I am okay with 5 or 10 different smaller players providing me unique capabilities as long as they are interconnected and they give me new capabilities rather than limit me.
Right. So rather than sort of, trying to do it all themselves, which they've done in the past, and trying to control everything, is kind of just let go and surrender a little bit. Okay. Yep. All right. So let's move on to good number 4. And good number 4 you picked was microservices poised to be the next big thing if buyers take control of their data, right? And this, I quote you. You said, after being involved in corporate travel for more than 20 years, I find it fascinating when a global travel buyer spending millions of dollars annually on travel says, my TMC will not let me use my data for a new service. So specifically, what kind of microservices could corporate travel buyers develop that would serve their travelers better?
So one obvious one, we already touched on it, right, is intelligent dynamic carbon emission calculation. So the moment somebody starts searching for booking options, they also see the current carbon budget and they see the carbon emission from the different options they're looking at. And all respect for TMCs, they are not carbon emission experts and should not try to become that. There are people out there who focus 100% on that. Take those technologies and blend them into the booking process. Profile management. Very few people today know what their profiles actually are used for, what third-party systems they have been sent to, who have access to the information in the profile. And then, of course, again, back to things like pricing systems. Think about the hotel RFP process, which I'm dismayed again to hear how the big corporates are lining up their RFP process for 2022 because that's what they're used to. Instead of saying, perhaps this is the moment when I can drop it and look at doing things in a different way. So all these areas are unique opportunities to have purpose-built technology that manage 1 or 2 processes very well, but they have to be connected into the TMC tech stack. And I won't name and shame any TMCs. I just really find it fascinating when a global buyer says, well, I'm not allowed to do that. It's your data. You have paid somebody to process your data. Of course you can do that.
Yeah, it always takes newcomers to come into an industry, and then, that's when kind of change happens, right? It doesn't happen with legacy players, but, change comes from the outside or within it sometimes. And, I think we're seeing some really interesting acquisitions taking place in corporate travel, right? We have Agencia now going to American Express, Global Business Travel. We have Trip Actions taking on Reed and McKay. So is consolidation one of the good that will come out of COVID? And what role will corporate travel startups have in this sort of really dynamic, changeable universe now?
I definitely think the corporate travel tech startups that are here now and new ones that will come, they have a critical role to finally create a digital foundation for TMC. Most TMCs today, from small to big, are people heavy, meaning most of the people are there to deliver travel service. And then you have a few of the new ones that are tech heavy. So they use technology to drive much higher productivity, and they're also better prepared for delivering and launching new services. However, if they start acquiring like they're doing right now, they make life hard for themselves because now they're getting the old fragmented tech stack problem. And all respect for a GPT move on Agencia. It's great in terms of scale, but it's going to be another very complex tech consolidation of very different platforms. And if I'm a buyer, I would rather have my supplier creating new services than integrate legacy systems.
But isn't that the usual dilemma? I mean, Johnny, you've been looking at startups for a long time, and a startup comes up and say, "I have got this great idea. I want to solve this particular problem," and it does it really well, and then suddenly it gets funding, and then suddenly realize, oh my, I have to scale, right? Because I've got all this funding coming in, and then suddenly it just grows bigger than it originally intended.
Yep, it is the dilemma of a startup, and one of the problems we've seen in the travel industry for a long time is that most travel tech startups are underfunded. In other words, they don't have the kind of the funding to stay true to a strategy long enough to really get to a point where they become independent. So they either have to partner up very early on with the legacy players, and that does limit their freedom and their ability to innovate, because obviously you're not going to work against a partner. So I'm interested to see if COVID will give us a new generation of well-funded startups that are able to go after the long-term opportunity and really become a threat to the established environment. Big crises normally deliver big disruption long-term. And I do think we will see something unexpected come out of the COVID kind of recovery phase.
What's the most interesting travel startup that you've come across recently that you're not involved with? That's something out of the, out of your horizon, and you went, that's interesting.
So that I'm not involved in, there's actually two right now that are doing something very interesting. One is a UK-based startup called Kite, K-Y-T-E. They are developing a kind of an API engine that can go on top of an airline's legacy infrastructure. So instead of saying it's NDC or nothing, Kite provide an airline with a modern API stack that they can put on top, and now they can use NDC or other capabilities, and they can start kind of retailizing their infrastructure, both for own purpose, but also for third parties in the industry. So that's one interesting one. The other one is a Danish one called Pere, P-E-R-E. They have developed a recommendation engine that manages the money flow when a concierge in a hotel sends you somewhere. They are now able to kind of put a process in place, so wherever you go on that recommendation, something will flow back to the person that sent you there. Today, there's a lot of cash moving around in that industry, and we're now seeing the first example of technology moving into the recommendation world in general.
Fantastic. Kites, I recall they pitched at our event last year. I recall the pitch. Okay, so let's end with rapid fire. All right. So last October at WiT, no, I think it was 2019, you predicted that the user interface will disappear thanks to AI. By when?
Yep, it was October 19, and boy, was that a different world. So I still think it'll happen, but I have to admit it's going to happen a little slower than I thought then. So I'm putting 2025 as a target because it's not the most important thing to address right now. But I do think it'll happen as technology evolves.
So that's the one thing that COVID has not accelerated. Okay, the one thing travel tech companies should not waste time on.
Ooh, that's an interesting one. Many things in general, but what would be the one thing? Probably to develop new reporting solutions. I mean, there are so many reporting solutions out there already that I don't think we need new reporting capabilities. Just make sure you deliver quality data to something else.
The one thing that travel tech companies should spend time on.
Building API for every single capability they have, so they become available as an API rather than as a product.
The one thing you wish airlines would stop saying.
That they take my data privacy seriously. I don't know of any airline yet who have told me where my data have gone. And when SETA got hacked, I was quite surprised to find that I got 6 emails from 6 different airlines telling me my data was in SETA as well. I did not know that. So until they can tell me where it goes, don't tell me they take it serious.
Okay. The one thing you wish TMCs would stop saying.
That they can find the lowest price for their customers. There is no lowest price. There is the right price or the best price. But the lowest price, as you well know, is such an arbitrary kind of term that stop using it, please.
Okay, finally, if I were to invite you to Singapore to speak at the WiT conference this year, and you were allowed to travel and we were allowed to welcome you, would you?
I would, if I could meet one of my new personal travel policy requirements, which is that I don't do long hauls anymore unless it's for a one-way trip. So I will not do any 1, 2, 3 day trips to a 8-hour plus destination. That's my personal carbon kind of commitment. But
Okay.
I would definitely be ready to come out, and I know I could fill a week with great activities. So I would like to come out, but it would be for a week or more.
Okay, we'll make sure that we pack that week with full of activities and business meetings for you, so that we get to see you for real in Singapore. Thank you, Johnny.
I would love to, Siew. Thanks a lot.
All the best. See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.